The soap burned her raw hands as Eliza Monroe scrubbed another grease-caked plate in the back room of the Dusty Rose Saloon, her stomach growling so fiercely she thought the piano music out front might not cover the sound. It was September 1878 in Tombstone, Arizona territory, and she had been living on potato peelings and stale bread ends for 3 weeks now, ever since the stagecoach robbery that left her stranded here with nothing but the threadbare dress on her back and her late mother's reading primer tucked into her bodice. The water in the basin had gone cold an hour ago, but old Sal, who ran the kitchen, never wasted firewood heating water for a girl who worked only for scraps, and Eliza had learned not to complain about anything if she wanted to keep even this miserable arrangement. She had come west from Boston with her mother 2 years earlier, chasing the promise of teaching positions in the growing frontier towns. But consumption had taken her mother in Santa Fe, and Eliza had pressed on alone with what little money remained, determined to honor her mother's dream of bringing education to children who had none. The robbery had stolen her last savings and her trunk of books, leaving her with nothing in a silver mining town that had little use for a 22-year-old schoolteacher with refined Boston manners and no connections. She had tried every respectable establishment in Tombstone, but the mine owners' wives took one look at her shabby dress and dismissed her, and the town's single schoolhouse already had a teacher, a stern man from Philadelphia who made it clear he needed no assistant, especially not a woman young enough to distract his older students. So, she washed dishes for scraps and slept in the storage room behind the saloon, curled up on flour sacks, trying not to think about how far she had fallen from the comfortable brownstone where she had grown up, where her father had been a respected banker before his heart gave out when she was 16. Her mother had sold everything to keep Eliza in finishing school, to give her daughter every advantage, and this was what had come of it: hands rubbed raw, sleeping with mice, hungry enough to consider eating the soap. "Girl!" Old Sal's voice cracked like a whip. "There's a man asking about you out front. Says he heard you can read." Eliza's heart jumped. She dried her hands on her apron, wincing at the sting, and tucked a strand of dark hair back into the knot at her neck. She followed Sal through the kitchen and into the main room of the saloon, where afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing above the poker tables. A man stood near the bar, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat in his hands revealing sun-streaked brown hair that needed cutting. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the desert sun and eyes the color of creek water in spring. His clothes were clean but worn, a working man's clothes, and he had the easy stance of someone comfortable in his own skin. "You the girl who reads?" he asked, his voice low and careful, the kind of voice that did not waste words. "I am," Eliza said, lifting her chin despite her shabby appearance. "I was a school teacher in Boston." His eyes swept over her, taking in the ragged dress and the hollows in her cheeks, but his expression did not change. "Name's Jacob Hartley. I got a ranch about 10 miles north of town. My daughter needs teaching. She's 8 years old and doesn't know her letters. Her ma died 2 years back, and I've been trying to teach her myself, but I can barely read past a few words. I can pay $20 a month, room and board included." $20, room and board. Eliza's knees nearly buckled. It was not the salary she had dreamed of when she left Boston, but it was a fortune compared to scraps and flour sacks. She opened her mouth to accept immediately, then forced herself to slow down, to ask the questions a proper woman should ask. "You said your daughter is 8, she confirmed, "and you need someone to live at your ranch and provide daily instruction?" "That's right. It's just me and Lucy out there, and my ranch hand Tomas, who has a cabin on the property. I know it might not be proper, a single woman living under my roof, but I'm gone most days with the cattle, and Lucy needs a woman around. She needs someone who can teach her to be a lady, not just how to rope a calf. I can give you your own room, and Tomas's wife Maria comes up from their cabin to help with cooking and cleaning 3 times a week. She could chaperone, if that makes it more proper." It was not entirely proper, but Eliza was long past the point where she could afford to care about such things. Besides, she had seen enough of Tombstone to know that frontier life did not follow Boston rules. Out here, people made their own arrangements and did what they needed to survive. "I accept your offer, Mr. Hartley," she said. "When would you like me to start?" "Can you ride a horse?" he asked. "I learned basic riding in finishing school," she admitted, "though it has been some time." "We'll take it slow then. I've got a gentle mare. We can leave within the hour if you need to gather your things." Eliza almost laughed at that. Her things consisted of her mother's primer, the dress she wore, and a spare set of undergarments she had washed and mended so many times they were more patch than original fabric. "I'm ready whenever you are, Mr. Hartley." He nodded and placed his hat back on his head. "I'll get the horses ready and meet you out front. And Miss Monroe, Eliza Monroe. Miss Monroe." He touched his hat brim and walked out, his boots striking solid against the wooden floor. Old Sal snorted beside her. "You sure about this, girl? Going off alone with a strange man to some isolated ranch? You don't know nothing about him." "I know he is offering me honest work and a roof over my head," Eliza said quietly. "That is more than I have here." "Well, it's your funeral," Sal said, but her expression softened slightly. "Wait here." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned a moment later with a cloth bundle. Leftover biscuits and some jerky, for the ride. It was the first true kindness anyone had shown Eliza in weeks, and her throat tightened. "Thank you." Sal waved her off. "Get on, before I change my mind." Eliza went to the storage room and retrieved her primer, then walked out into the bright Arizona afternoon. Jacob Hartley waited with 2 horses, a large bay gelding and a smaller chestnut mare with a kind eye. He helped Eliza into the saddle without any unnecessary touching, his hands respectful and steady, and then swung onto his own horse with the ease of long practice. They rode north out of Tombstone, leaving behind the noise and chaos of the mining town for the open desert landscape. The September heat was still fierce, but a breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Eliza had ridden side saddle in Boston parks, trotting sedately along groomed paths, but this was different. The mare had a smooth gait, and as they moved deeper into the open country, Eliza felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of fear and hunger that had been clenched there for months. "Lucy's excited to meet you," Jacob said after they had ridden in silence for a while. "I told her this morning that I was going to find her a teacher, and she near about jumped out of her skin. She's a good girl, smart, but I haven't done right by her since her ma passed. I've been so focused on keeping the ranch going that I let her education slide." "What happened to your wife, if you do not mind my asking?" Eliza asked carefully. His jaw tightened. "Fever. It came on fast, and by the time we got her to the doctor in town, there was nothing to be done. Lucy was only 6. She watched her ma fade away over 3 days, and I think part of her has been fading ever since. She does her chores, helps where she can, but she's quiet. Too quiet for a little girl." "I am sorry for your loss," Eliza said, and meant it. She knew what it was to lose a parent, to feel unmoored in the world. "It's been hard," he acknowledged, "but we manage. The ranch keeps us fed and we have good water. It's not much, but it's ours. My father started it 20 years ago, and when he died 5 years back, it came to me. We run about 300 head of cattle, mostly for local sale, some for the Army contracts. It's steady work." They rode on, and Jacob pointed out landmarks, a distinctive red rock formation that marked the boundary of his land, a dry creek bed that ran with water in spring, the distant purple mountains that stood like sentinels on the horizon. He spoke with a quiet pride about his ranch, and Eliza found herself listening not just to his words, but to the cadence of his voice, the way he measured his sentences as carefully as he seemed to measure everything else. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when they crested a low hill, and Eliza saw the ranch spread out below. It was modest but well kept, a wooden house with a covered porch, a large barn painted red, several corrals, and a smaller cabin set about 100 yards from the main house. Chickens scratched in a yard, and she could see a vegetable garden protected by a fence. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, and as they rode closer, a small figure burst out of the main house and came running toward them. "Papa! Papa, you are back!" Lucy Hartley was a tiny thing, all sharp elbows and long braids the color of wheat. She wore a simple dress that was too short for her, revealing scabbed knees and bare feet, and her face was lit up with excitement. She stopped short when she saw Eliza, suddenly shy, and pressed herself against her father's leg as he dismounted. "Lucy, this is Miss Monroe," Jacob said gently, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She's going to be your teacher and help take care of you. Can you say hello?" "Hello," Lucy whispered, peeking up at Eliza with eyes the same creek water green as her father's. Eliza slid down from the mare, grateful when her legs held steady, and crouched down so she was at Lucy's eye level. "Hello, Lucy. I'm very pleased to meet you. Your father tells me you are ready to learn to read." Lucy nodded, still half hidden behind Jacob. Papa says reading is like magic, that you can hear people's voices even when they are far away. That is exactly right, Eliza said, smiling. Would you like me to show you? Another nod, more eager this time. Eliza pulled out her mother's primer, the worn leather cover soft with age and handling. She opened it to the first page, where large clear letters spelled out simple words. This word is cat, and this one is dog, and this one is run. When you learn to read these letters, you can hear the story in your head, just like someone is telling it to you. Lucy reached out a tentative finger and traced the letters. Will you teach me all the words? Every single one, Eliza promised. Lucy smiled then, a real smile that transformed her solemn little face, and Eliza felt her heart squeeze. This child needed her, not for fine manners or social graces, but for something more fundamental, the gift of knowledge, the ability to make sense of the written world, to hear the voices of people across distance and time. It was exactly what her mother had dreamed of providing, and Eliza would not fail. Jacob showed Eliza to her room, a small but clean space at the back of the house with a real bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. After months of sleeping on flour sacks, the bed looked like impossible luxury. He gave her a few minutes to settle in, then called her to supper. Maria, a warm woman in her 40s with silver threading through her dark hair, had left a pot of stew and fresh tortillas. They ate at a wooden table in the kitchen, Lucy chattering now that her initial shyness had worn off, telling Eliza about the chickens and the new calf, and the lizard she had caught that morning. Jacob listened with patient attention, occasionally interjecting a question or a gentle correction when Lucy's enthusiasm carried her into exaggeration. After supper, Eliza helped Lucy wash up and get ready for bed. The little girl's room was simple but clearly loved, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a collection of smooth stones on the windowsill. Lucy climbed into bed and looked up at Eliza hopefully. Will you read me a story? Of course. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and opened the primer, reading one of the simple tales about a fox and a rabbit. Lucy listened with absolute focus, her eyes wide, and when Eliza finished, she whispered, "Again." Eliza read it again, and then once more, until Lucy's eyes began to drift closed. She tucked the covers around the little girl and stood to leave, but Lucy's hand shot out and caught hers. "Thank you for coming, Miss Monroe. I am glad you are here." "I am glad to be here, Lucy. Sleep well." She found Jacob on the front porch, sitting in a rocking chair and looking out at the darkening landscape. He glanced up when she stepped out and gestured to the chair beside him. "She settled okay?" "She is a lovely child," Eliza said, sinking into the chair. "You have done well with her, Mr. Hartley." "Jacob," he said, "out here, we don't stand much on formality. And I haven't done well enough. That's why I needed you." "Jacob, then, and you may call me Eliza." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the sage. The sky was a deep indigo, scattered with more stars than Eliza had ever seen in Boston, where city lights dimmed the heavens. "I want you to know," Jacob said eventually, "that you are safe here. I know you are taking a risk, coming out to a stranger's ranch, but I give you my word that I will treat you with respect, and so will anyone who sets foot on this property. You are here to teach Lucy and to make a life for yourself if you want it. Nothing more is expected." Something in Eliza's chest, some last bit of tension she had been carrying, finally released. "Thank you. That means a great deal. We start early around here," he continued. "I'm usually up before dawn to see to the animals, and Lucy wakes around 6. Maria comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She will help you with anything you need. On Sundays, we sometimes go into town for church, but that is your choice. I won't force religion on you if it is not your inclination." "I attended church with my mother," Eliza said. "I would be happy to accompany you and Lucy." He nodded, seeming satisfied. "Then I will bid you good night. You have had a long day." "Good night, Jacob." Eliza went to her room and closed the door, then stood for a long moment, simply looking at the bed with its clean sheets and thick blankets. She undressed slowly, washed her face and hands in the basin on the dresser, and slipped between the sheets. They smelled of sunshine and sage, and the mattress was soft beneath her aching body. For the first time in months, Eliza Monroe felt safe. She closed her eyes and slept dreamlessly, without hunger, without fear. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing and pale dawnlight filtering through her window. For a confused moment, she did not know where she was, and then memory flooded back. The ranch, Jacob, Lucy? She rose quickly and dressed, then ventured out to find the kitchen empty, but the stove already lit. A pot of coffee sat warming, and she poured herself a cup, savoring the rich, bitter taste. Jacob came in from outside, carrying a bucket of fresh milk. He looked startled to see her. "You are up early. I thought you might sleep longer after yesterday." "I am used to early mornings," she said, "and I am eager to begin Lucy's lessons." "Is she awake?" "Just rousing. I will get her up and dressed, and then we can have breakfast. Can you cook?" "Adequately," Eliza said. "Nothing fancy, but I can manage eggs and bacon." "That sounds fine." They worked together easily, Jacob slicing bread, while Eliza cooked eggs and bacon in the cast-iron skillet. Lucy appeared still rubbing sleep from her eyes, and brightened when she saw Eliza. They ate together, and then Jacob headed out to work the cattle with Tomas, leaving Eliza and Lucy to clear the table and wash the dishes together. "Now," Eliza said, "shall we begin your lessons?" Lucy nodded eagerly, and they settled at the kitchen table with a primer between them. Eliza started with the alphabet, tracing each letter and having Lucy repeat the sounds. The little girl was quick and focused, her small finger following along as Eliza pointed to each symbol. They worked for 2 hours until Lucy's attention began to wander, and then Eliza called a break. "Learning is hard work," she told Lucy. "We must give our minds time to rest. Why do not you show me around the ranch?" Lucy took her hand and pulled her outside, chattering about everything. They visited the chickens, and Lucy introduced each hen by name. They looked in on the horses in the barn, and Lucy showed Eliza the new calf, a wobbly-legged creature that butted its head against Eliza's palm. They walked down to the garden, where tomatoes hung heavy on the vine, and squash sprawled across the dirt. "Mama planted this garden," Lucy said quietly. "Papa keeps it going for her. He says she would be sad if we let it die." "It is a beautiful garden," Eliza said. "Your mother must have worked very hard on it." "She was always working," Lucy said. "Papa says she was the strongest woman he ever knew. She used to read to me at night, just like you did. I miss her voice." Eliza knelt beside the little girl and took her hands gently. "I cannot replace your mother, Lucy. No one could. But I can help you learn to read so that you can hear stories whenever you want, in your own voice or in the voices of people who wrote the words long ago. Would you like that?" "Yes," Lucy whispered. "I want to make Mama proud." "I think she is already proud of you," Eliza said softly, "and I think she would be glad you are learning." They returned to the house and worked on lessons for another hour, Lucy carefully copying letters on a slate that Jacob had purchased in town. Her little tongue stuck out in concentration as she formed the shapes, and Eliza praised each attempt, gently correcting when needed. By midday, Lucy had learned to write her own name, and her face glowed with accomplishment. Jacob came in for the noon meal, dusty and tired, and Lucy ran to him immediately. "Papa! Papa! Look, I can write my name." She thrust the slate at him, and he studied it carefully, then smiled, a real smile that softened his weather-worn face. "That is mighty fine work, little bit. I am proud of you." Lucy beamed and looked at Eliza. "Miss Eliza is the best teacher ever." "I can see that," Jacob said, and his eyes met Eliza's over Lucy's head. There was gratitude there, and something else, something warm that made Eliza's stomach flutter unexpectedly. The days developed a rhythm. Eliza woke early and helped with breakfast, then spent the mornings teaching Lucy reading and writing and arithmetic. In the afternoons, she taught Lucy household skills, baking bread, mending clothes, caring for the chickens. Lucy soaked up knowledge like dry earth soaking up rain, and within 2 weeks, she could read simple 3-letter words and was working her way through basic sentences in the primer. Maria proved to be a godsend, a motherly woman who took Eliza under her wing and taught her the practical skills needed for ranch life: how to bake bread in the cast-iron oven, how to preserve vegetables, how to make soap from lye and lard. Maria had raised 6 children of her own, all now grown, and she clearly missed having little ones to fuss over. She doted on Lucy and welcomed Eliza into the household as though she had always been part of it. Tomas, Maria's husband, was a quiet man who had worked for Jacob's father and stayed on after the old man died. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent his entire life outdoors, and he was patient with Eliza's questions about ranch life, explaining things in simple terms without ever making her feel foolish for not knowing. Jacob himself remained somewhat distant, polite and respectful, but not given to long conversations. He worked from dawn until well past dark most days, coming in exhausted and dusty to eat whatever meal Eliza had prepared. He always thanked her, always asked about Lucy's progress, but he seemed careful not to spend too much time alone with her, as though conscious of propriety even in his own home. But Eliza caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she was not looking. Once, when she was teaching Lucy to waltz in the kitchen using her mother's old music box, she glanced up to find him standing in the doorway, his expression soft and yearning. Another time, she was hanging laundry on the line and singing an old hymn her mother had taught her, and she turned to find him frozen by the barn, listening with his eyes closed. Each time, he quickly looked away and returned to work, but Eliza felt those glances settle into her like warmth. She was not immune to him either. He was nothing like the polished bankers and merchants her mother had hoped she would marry in Boston. Jacob Hartley was rough-edged and work-hardened, his hands calloused and his face weathered, but there was a kindness in him that ran deep, a quiet strength that made Eliza feel safe in a way she had never felt before. She liked the way he was gentle with Lucy, never raising his voice even when the little girl tested his patience. She liked the way he treated Maria and Tomas as family rather than hired help. She liked the way he moved, economical and sure, as though he never wasted a single motion. She tried to tell herself it was foolish to develop feelings for her employer, that she was here to do a job and nothing more. But her heart did not listen to logic. One evening in early October, about a month after Eliza had arrived, a dust storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned orange, then brown, and the wind howled around the house like a living thing. Jacob came in early and secured the animals in the barn, then helped Eliza and Lucy stuff rags under the doors to keep out the dust. "These storms can last hours or days," he said. "We just have to wait it out." They huddled inside, while the wind screamed and dust found its way through every crack and crevice. Lucy was frightened, pressing close to Eliza, and Eliza distracted her by teaching her a hand-clapping game her mother had taught her as a child. Jacob watched them with that soft expression again, and when Lucy finally fell asleep on Eliza's lap, he spoke quietly. "She has changed since you came. She smiles more, talks more. I did not realize how much she had withdrawn into herself until I saw her coming back out." "She is a bright, loving child," Eliza said, stroking Lucy's hair. "She just needed someone to see her." "You are good with her," he said, "better than I ever could be." "You are a wonderful father," Eliza said firmly. "Lucy adores you. She just needed a woman's presence. That is not a failing on your part." He was quiet for a long moment, and the wind howled outside. Then he said, "My wife, Ellen, she was a school teacher too. That is how we met. She came out here to teach at the Army fort, and I was delivering cattle. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her, standing in the schoolhouse doorway with chalk dust on her nose. She said she would never marry a rancher, that she had not come west to become a rancher's wife. But I courted her for 2 years, and eventually she said yes." His voice grew rough. "I promised her I would give Lucy everything she could have had if we had stayed in the East. Education, culture, opportunities. And then Ellen died, and I could barely keep us fed, let alone worry about Lucy's schooling. I failed them both." "You did not fail anyone," Eliza said fiercely. "You kept Lucy safe and loved. You kept the ranch running. You did not give up. And now you are giving Lucy exactly what you promised, an education. You hired me even though you must have needed that money for other things. That is not failure. Jacob, that is love." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "I am glad you are here, Eliza. Not just for Lucy. For me, too. It has been a long time since this house felt like a home." Before she could respond, the wind changed direction and rattled the windows so hard they thought the glass might break. The moment passed, and they focused on keeping Lucy comfortable and the dust at bay. But something had shifted between them, some acknowledgement of what had been building slowly over the past month. The dust storm finally blew itself out near midnight, and they all went to bed exhausted. Eliza lay awake in the darkness, listening to the house settle, thinking about Jacob's words. He had loved his wife deeply, that much was clear, But Ellen had been gone for 2 years, and Eliza did not think it was wrong that he might be ready to open his heart again. The question was whether he could see her, Eliza Monroe, as anything more than Lucy's teacher. As autumn deepened, the work on the ranch intensified. It was time to round up the cattle and sort them for sale, and Jacob was gone from dawn until well past dark. One evening, he came in limping, his face tight with pain. Eliza made him sit and examined his leg, finding a massive bruise spreading across his thigh. "What happened?" she demanded. "Got pinned between a steer and the fence," he said. "It is nothing, just a bruise." "It is not nothing. You need to rest that leg, or you will make it worse." "I do not have time to rest. We are behind on the roundup as it is." Eliza stood and crossed her arms. "You are no good to this ranch if you cripple yourself. Rest tomorrow, at least the morning. Let Thomas handle things." Jacob opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and there was a hint of amusement in his voice. The next morning, Eliza brought him breakfast in bed, which clearly embarrassed him, but she insisted. She also brought a hot compress for his leg and made him keep it elevated. Lucy thought it was great fun to have her papa trapped in bed, and spent the morning reading to him from the primer, showing off everything she had learned. "Listen, Papa, the cat ran up the tree. The dog could not follow." She beamed at him. "I read that all by myself." "You sure did," Jacob said, pulling her in for a hug. "I am so proud of you, little bit." By afternoon, Jacob was restless and insisted on getting up. His leg was better, the swelling reduced, and he moved more easily. He found Eliza in the garden, harvesting the last of the tomatoes before the frost came. "Thank you," he said, "for taking care of me." "That is what people do," Eliza said. "They take care of each other." He picked up a basket and started helping her, and they worked in companionable silence for a while. Then he said, "I have been thinking. Lucy's birthday is in 3 weeks. She will be 9. I want to do something special for her. Ellen always made her a cake with white frosting and threw a party with all the children from the surrounding ranches. I have not had the heart to do it the past 2 years, but I think it is time. Do you think you could help me plan something?" "I would love to," Eliza said warmly. "What if we invited a few families and had games? And I can make the cake if you tell me Ellen's recipe." "I don't remember it exactly, but Maria might. Ellen taught her how to make it." They spent the next few weeks planning Lucy's party. Eliza and Maria baked and prepared food. Jacob cleaned the barn and set up tables. They invited 3 families from neighboring ranches, families with children around Lucy's age, and on the day of the party, the ranch was full of life and laughter. Lucy wore a new dress that Eliza had sewn for her, pale blue with white ribbons, and her face glowed with happiness. The children played games, sack races, horseshoes, tag among the hay bales. The adults sat on the porch and talked, and Eliza found herself welcomed warmly by the other women, who were clearly starved for female companionship in this isolated country. When it came time for cake, they all gathered around the big table in the barn. Maria brought out a beautiful 2-layer cake with white frosting, and Lucy's eyes went wide. "It looks just like the ones Mama made." Jacob's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Make a wish, little bit." Lucy closed her eyes, her face serious with concentration, then blew out all 9 candles in one breath. Everyone cheered, and Jacob cut the cake, serving Lucy the first piece. She took a bite and smiled. "It tastes like Mama's, too." After the guests had left and Lucy had fallen asleep, exhausted from excitement, Jacob found Eliza on the porch. She was wrapped in a shawl against the cool evening air, looking out at the stars. "Thank you for today," he said, sitting beside her. "It meant the world to Lucy. And to me." "She deserves to be celebrated," Eliza said. "She is a special child." "She is." He paused, then said carefully, "The other women, they were asking about you, about your situation here." Eliza tensed. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that you are Lucy's teacher and part of our household. But I could see them thinking, making assumptions. I do not want you to be the subject of gossip, Eliza. If it would protect your reputation, I could build you a separate cabin, something like what Thomas and Maria have, give you more independence." The thought of living separately, of losing the easy intimacy of sharing the house, made Eliza's chest tighten, but she understood what he was offering. Protection for her name, respect for her position. It was the gentlemanly thing to do. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. No, he said, and his voice was rough. But I want what is best for you. She turned to look at him, at his honest face in the starlight. What is best for me is to be here with Lucy, with you. I do not care what the gossips say. His hand found hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. Eliza, I need to be honest with you. When I hired you, I told myself it was just for Lucy, that I needed a teacher and nothing more. But that was a lie. From the first moment I saw you in that saloon, something in me recognized something in you, and every day you have been here, I have fallen more in love with you. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. Jacob, let me finish, he said. I know I am not what you deserve. You are educated and refined, from a good family. I am just a rancher with dirt under his nails and a modest spread. I cannot give you the life you would have had in Boston, but I can give you a home and a family and love. So much love. Eliza, if you would have me. Jacob Hartley, Eliza said, her voice shaking. I do not want the life I would have had in Boston. That life died when my mother did, and I am glad of it. I want this life. I want to teach Lucy and help with the ranch and sit on this porch watching the stars with you. I want to build something real out here, something that matters. And I have been falling in love with you too, so hard I could barely breathe sometimes. He stood and pulled her up with him, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. Can I kiss you? Please, she whispered. He kissed her softly, reverently, as though she were something precious and breakable. But Eliza was not breakable. She had survived loss and hunger and fear, and she had come out stronger. She kissed him back with all the passion she had been holding in, and he made a low sound in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Eliza. Let me make this right and proper. Let me give you my name and my life. Yes, she said. Yes, Jacob, I will marry you. They told Lucy the next morning over breakfast. The little girl looked between them with wide eyes, processing the news, and Eliza held her breath. Then Lucy launched herself at Eliza, wrapping her thin arms around her waist. Does this mean you will stay forever? You will be my mama? Eliza's throat closed. I will never replace your first mama, Lucy. But if you will have me, I will love you and care for you for the rest of my life. I want you to be my mama, Lucy said fiercely. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Lucy turned to her father. Can we have a wedding with a white dress and flowers? Jacob laughed. We can have whatever kind of wedding you want, little bit, but you will have to help Miss Eliza plan it. They decided to marry in December, giving them time to prepare and to get through the fall work on the ranch. Word spread quickly through the community, and Eliza found herself receiving visits from the neighboring women, all of them delighted by the news. They brought gifts, quilts and preserves and recipes, and offered advice on everything from wedding cakes to wedding nights. Maria cried when they told her, and declared she would make Eliza's wedding dress. She had been a seamstress in Mexico before coming north with Tomas, and her skills were considerable. Eliza stood for hours while Maria measured and pinned, creating a dress of ivory silk that Maria had been saving for years, waiting for the right occasion. Jacob went to Tombstone and returned with a ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. He slipped it on Eliza's finger one evening as they sat on the porch, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. My mother would have loved you, he said. She always wanted me to find a woman with fire in her, someone who could hold her own out here. You are that woman, Eliza. The weeks flew past in a blur of preparation. Eliza continued teaching Lucy, who was now reading at a level that would have been respectable for a child 2 years older. She could write simple sentences and was working on basic arithmetic. More importantly, she had blossomed into a confident, happy child who laughed often and spoke her mind. 2 weeks before the wedding, a rider came to the ranch with news that made Jacob's face go grim. There had been cattle rustling in the area, and several ranchers had lost significant numbers. The territorial marshal was asking all the ranchers to keep watch and report anything suspicious. I need to ride the property lines more often, Jacob told Eliza that night. Keep the cattle closer to the house. It means longer days for a while. We will manage, Eliza said. You do what you need to do. He kissed her softly. I cannot wait until you are my wife, and I can come home to you every night knowing you are mine. I am already yours, she said. The ceremony is just making it official. but the threat of rustlers put everyone on edge. Tomas and Jacob took turns riding night watch, and Eliza made sure to keep the rifle loaded by the door, though she prayed she would never need to use it. Lucy sensed the tension and stayed closer to the house, her earlier confidence dimmed slightly by the adults' worry. One evening, when Jacob was out on patrol and Tomas was checking the southern pastures, Eliza heard horses approaching. She looked out to see 3 rough-looking men riding up to the house. Her heart lurched, but she forced herself to stay calm. She sent Lucy to her room and told her to stay there no matter what, then stepped out onto the porch with the rifle cradled in her arms. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she called, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. The lead rider, a man with a scarred face and mean eyes, looked her over in a way that made her skin crawl. "We are looking for the owner of this spread. He around?" "He is out checking the herd," Eliza said. "He should be back shortly. You are welcome to wait." "Maybe we will," Scarface said. "Or maybe we will just take a look around ourselves, make sure everything is in order." "I would prefer you wait here," Eliza said, and raised the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at them, but making her meaning clear. Scarface laughed. "You gonna shoot us, school teacher?" "If I have to," Eliza said. "My father taught me to shoot when I was 10 years old, and I am an excellent markswoman. So, I suggest you stay on your horses and wait for Mr. Hartley to return." The 3 men exchanged glances, and Eliza's finger tightened on the trigger. Then she heard hoofbeats behind the men, and Jacob came thundering up with Tomas right behind him. Both men had rifles out, and their faces were hard. "You men need to move along," Jacob said coldly. "Now." Scarface sized up the situation and apparently decided the odds were not in his favor. "We were just passing through, looking for work." "There is no work here, and you are on my land without permission. Leave before I decide to involve the marshal." The 3 men turned their horses and rode off, but not before Scarface shot one more look at Eliza that promised trouble. When they were out of sight, Jacob dismounted and strode to Eliza, pulling her into his arms. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "I am fine," she said, though she was shaking now that the danger had passed. "They just wanted to look around. I think they were scouting for the rustlers." "Probably," Tomas said grimly. "I recognize one of them from town. They have been hanging around the saloons, drinking and causing trouble." "I am sending word to the marshal," Jacob said, "and I am not leaving you and Lucy alone again until this is settled." He was true to his word. For the next week, either he or Tomas was always within sight of the house. The neighboring ranchers organized patrols, riding in groups to watch the herds and protect their land. The tension was thick enough to taste, and Eliza worried constantly, not just for their cattle, but for Jacob's safety. Then one night, shots rang out from the southern pasture. Jacob grabbed his rifle and rode out with Tomas and 2 men from the neighboring ranch. Eliza waited in agony, the rifle across her lap, Lucy sleeping fitfully in the next room. It was near dawn when Jacob finally returned, exhausted and dirty, but unhurt. "We caught them," he said. 4 men trying to cut out 20 head. The marshal has them now. They will hang for rustling." "Are you sure it is over?" Eliza asked. "As sure as I can be. They said there were only 4 of them working this area. We will keep up the patrols for another few weeks, but I think the worst has passed." Eliza sagged with relief and let Jacob hold her, breathing in the scent of him, sweat and horses and the clean desert air. "I am so glad you are safe." "I told you," he murmured against her hair. "I have something to live for now. I am not going anywhere." With the rustlers caught, the mood on the ranch lifted. The wedding was only days away, and Eliza threw herself into final preparations. Maria finished the dress, a beautiful confection of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Eliza tried it on and barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like a bride, like a woman with a future stretching bright and golden before her. They decided to hold the wedding at the ranch, with the local circuit preacher officiating. The same families who had come to Lucy's party would attend, along with a few ranchers and townspeople who had befriended Jacob over the years. It would be simple but heartfelt, which was exactly what Eliza wanted. The night before the wedding, Maria shooed Jacob out of the house, insisting on the old tradition that the bride and groom should not see each other. Jacob went to stay in Tomas and Maria's cabin, grumbling good-naturedly about being kicked out of his own home. Eliza and Lucy and Maria stayed up late, giggling and telling stories, and Eliza felt surrounded by love in a way she had not since her mother died. "Are you nervous?" Lucy asked as they lay together in Eliza's bed, one last night before everything changed. "A little," Eliza admitted, "but mostly I'm excited. I love your father very much, Lucy, and I love you." "I am glad Papa found you," Lucy said sleepily. "I prayed for a mama, and God sent you." Eliza's throat tightened. "I prayed for a family, and God sent both of you. We found each other." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, a perfect December morning, with frost sparkling on the ground. Eliza woke early, her stomach a jumble of nerves and anticipation. Maria helped her dress, arranging her hair in an elegant twist, and pinning a small wreath of winter greenery and dried flowers to her head. "You look beautiful," Maria said, her eyes wet. "Like an angel." Lucy burst into the room, wearing a new dress of green velvet that Eliza had made for her. "Miss Eliza, the preacher is here, and people are arriving, and Papa is pacing like a cat in a thunderstorm," Eliza laughed. "Then I suppose we should not keep him waiting." They had set up chairs in the barn, which had been swept and decorated with pine boughs and candles. The guests were already seated, and the preacher stood ready. Jacob waited at the front, and when Eliza stepped into the barn on Tomas's arm, he had agreed to give her away. Jacob's face transformed. He looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world, and Eliza felt her nerves settle. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices. Jacob promised to love and cherish her, to provide for her, to stand by her in good times and bad. Eliza promised the same, her voice thick with emotion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Jacob he could kiss his bride, Jacob cupped her face tenderly and kissed her with such love that several women in the audience sighed audibly. The celebration afterward was joyous. Maria and the other women had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing. Lucy danced with her father and then with Eliza, and later Eliza danced with Jacob, his arms strong around her as they swayed to a fiddle tune. "Are you happy, Mrs. Hartley?" he murmured in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. As the afternoon wore on and the guests began to leave, Lucy started to droop. Maria offered to take her to the cabin for the night, giving Jacob and Eliza privacy for their wedding night. Lucy hugged them both fiercely, then went off with Maria, chattering about the party. Finally, they were alone. Jacob led Eliza into the house, and suddenly she was nervous again, her heart hammering. He seemed to sense her anxiety and moved slowly, carefully, taking her hand and leading her to the bedroom they would now share. "We do not have to do anything tonight except sleep," he said gently. "I want you to be comfortable, Eliza. I want this to be right." She looked at this good, kind man who had become her husband, and her nerves settled. "I want to be with you, Jacob, truly with you. Show me how." He kissed her softly, then more deeply, his hands gentle as he helped her out of the beautiful dress. She helped him with his clothes, and then they were skin to skin, learning each other with touches and whispers. Jacob was patient and tender, making sure of her pleasure before seeking his own, and when they finally came together, Eliza felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, and Jacob stroked her hair, pressing kisses to her forehead. "I love you, Eliza Hartley. Thank you for giving me a second chance at happiness." "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered, "for giving me a home and a family, for loving me." "Always," he promised. "I will always love you." Winter settled over the ranch, and Eliza adapted to her new role as wife and stepmother. She continued teaching Lucy, who was progressing so well that Eliza began ordering more advanced books from a catalog. She took over much of the household management, working with Maria to keep everything running smoothly, and she learned the rhythms of being married, the small intimacies and adjustments that came with sharing a life with someone. Jacob was an attentive husband, always making sure she was comfortable and happy. He consulted her on ranch decisions and listened when she offered opinions. He helped with dishes and childcare without being asked, and he never took her work for granted. And at night, when they lay together in the darkness, he held her close and told her all the things that were in his heart. "I did not think I would find love again after Ellen," he confessed one night. "I thought that part of my life was over, but what I feel for you is different from what I felt for her. Not less, just different. With Ellen, we were building something from scratch, two young people figuring out life together. With you, I am a man who knows what he wants and what he has. I appreciate you in a way I could not have at 25. "I am glad I waited," Eliza said. Glad I did not settle for some banker in Boston who wanted a decorative wife. You see me, Jacob, the real me, and you love me anyway. I love you because of who you are, he corrected, not in spite of it. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with Lucy, Tomas, and Maria. They gave Lucy a new set of books, and she squealed with delight. Jacob gave Eliza a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pens, saying he wanted her to record their life together. Eliza gave Jacob a new hat and a scarf she had knitted, and he wore them proudly even though the scarf was slightly lopsided. As winter eased into spring, Eliza began to suspect she might be pregnant. She missed her monthly courses, and her breasts were tender. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Jacob's hopes up in case she was wrong. But by March, she was certain, and one evening she told him as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Jacob, I have news. I am going to have a baby." He went very still, then turned to look at her with wonder in his eyes. "Truly?" "Truly. I am about 3 months along, I think. The baby should come in September." He let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are having a baby! Lucy, Lucy, come here!" Lucy came running, and Jacob scooped her up. "You are going to be a big sister." Lucy's eyes went wide. "A baby? A real baby?" "A real baby," Eliza confirmed. "In the fall." Lucy threw her arms around Eliza's neck. "I am going to teach the baby everything, reading and writing and how to feed the chickens and everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Eliza was tired in the early months. Jacob fussed over her constantly, trying to keep her from doing heavy work, and Maria was even worse, insisting Eliza rest and let others handle the chores. Lucy was endlessly fascinated, asking constant questions about how babies grew and where they came from, and Eliza answered as honestly as she could. As her belly swelled, Eliza felt a contentment she had never known. She was building the life her mother had wanted for her, not in the polished cities of the East, but here in the wild, open country. She was teaching, as her mother had dreamed, and she was loved, deeply and truly loved. In July, a letter arrived from Boston, forwarded through several addresses. It was from her mother's sister, Eliza's Aunt Catherine, whom she had not heard from in over a year. The letter explained that Aunt Catherine had finally received word of where Eliza was living and wanted to reconnect. She wrote that Eliza's father's estate had finally been fully settled, and there was a small inheritance waiting for Eliza if she wanted to claim it, about $500. Eliza showed the letter to Jacob. "I had no idea there was anything left. I thought my mother had spent everything." "That is a good sum of money," Jacob said. "What do you want to do with it?" Eliza thought for a long moment. "I want to use it to start a school, not just for Lucy, but for all the children in the area. There are at least a dozen families within riding distance who have children with no education. We could build a small schoolhouse on our land, and I could teach 3 days a week. It would be my mother's legacy, the thing she always dreamed of doing." Jacob smiled. "I think that is a fine idea. We can build it near the house, close enough that you can walk there even when the baby comes." They wrote back to Aunt Catherine, accepting the inheritance, and by August, the money had arrived. Jacob and Tomas began building the schoolhouse, a simple one-room structure with a wood stove and rows of benches. Eliza ordered slates and primers and basic textbooks, spending the money carefully to stretch it as far as possible. Word spread quickly about the school, and by the time it was finished, Eliza had 8 children enrolled, ranging in age from 6 to 13. They would start in October, after the baby was born and Eliza had recovered. In early September, Eliza went into labor. Maria had delivered dozens of babies and stayed with her through the long night and into the morning. Jacob paced the floor outside the bedroom, Lucy curled up asleep in a chair, until Maria finally opened the door and beckoned him in. "You have a son," she said, smiling. Jacob entered to find Eliza exhausted but glowing, a tiny wrapped bundle in her arms. She smiled up at him. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at the red, squalling infant. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Eliza asked. Jacob thought for a moment. "Thomas, after your father, and James, after mine. Thomas James Hartley." "Thomas James," Eliza repeated. "I love it." Lucy woke and came creeping in, her eyes huge. "Can I see him?" "Come here, sweetheart," Eliza said, and Lucy climbed carefully onto the bed. She stared at her baby brother with awe. "He is so small. Does he know how to do anything? Not yet, Eliza said, but you can help teach him, just like you promised. Lucy reached out a tentative finger, and Thomas wrapped his tiny hand around it. She gasped. He is holding me. He already loves his big sister, Jacob said, his voice thick. They spent the next few weeks adjusting to life with a newborn. Thomas was a good baby, only fussy when he was hungry, and he nursed well. Eliza was tired but happy, and Jacob was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking the floor when Thomas was restless. Lucy was the proudest big sister in Arizona, telling anyone who would listen about her baby brother. By October, Eliza felt ready to start teaching at the new school. She brought Thomas with her in a basket, and he slept through most of the lessons. The children were eager and bright, soaking up knowledge just as Lucy had. Eliza taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography, using the materials she had ordered and supplementing with stories from her own education. The school was a success. Parents were grateful their children were learning, and several of them offered to pay tuition, but Eliza refused. Education should be available to everyone, she said. That is what my mother believed, and I believe it too. As Thomas grew from infant to baby, the Hartley household settled into a comfortable routine. Lucy excelled in her studies and began helping Eliza teach the younger children at the school. Jacob's ranch prospered, and he was able to hire another hand to help Thomas with the work. Maria became like a mother to Eliza, and Thomas like a father, and the six of them formed a tight-knit family. 2 years after Thomas was born, Eliza discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Jacob did not fuss as much, trusting that she knew her own limits. The pregnancy was easy, and in the spring of 1882, Eliza gave birth to a daughter. They named her Ellen Maria, after Jacob's first wife and Maria, who had become such an important part of their lives. Lucy, now 13 and reading at an advanced level, doted on both her siblings. She had become Eliza's assistant at the school, helping the younger children with their letters and numbers. She talked of becoming a teacher herself someday, perhaps going to normal school and coming back to teach in the area. You would be a wonderful teacher, Eliza told her. You have patience and kindness, and you love learning. Those are the most important qualities. I learned from the best, Lucy said, hugging her. Thank you for coming into our lives, Mama. I do not know what we would have done without you. I am the one who should be thanking you, Eliza said. You and your father saved me. I was lost when I came here, and you gave me a home and a purpose. As the years passed, the school grew. By 1885, Eliza had 20 students, and she convinced the territorial government to provide some funding for supplies and materials. The one-room schoolhouse was bursting at the seams, and Jacob built an addition to accommodate everyone. Lucy went away to normal school in Phoenix when she was 16, writing long letters home about her classes and her dreams. She returned 2 years later, a certified teacher, and opened a school of her own at a ranch 15 miles south. She courted and married a young rancher, a kind man who reminded Eliza a great deal of Jacob, and they started their own family. Thomas grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who loved working with his father on the ranch. By the time he was 10, he could ride as well as any adult and had a gift for working with cattle. Ellen was quieter, more bookish, and she spent hours reading everything she could get her hands on. Eliza taught both of them at home, in addition to their work at the school, determined they would have every educational advantage. In 1888, when Eliza was 32 and Jacob was 38, they added another child to their family, a son they named Samuel. He completed their family, and Eliza felt her life was full to overflowing with blessings. Jacob's ranch had grown to over 1,000 head of cattle, and he had become a respected figure in the territory. But he never forgot where he came from, and he and Eliza made sure to help neighbors who fell on hard times, offering work or food, or simply a listening ear. They had become pillars of their community, known for their generosity and integrity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jacob took Eliza back to Tombstone for the first time since he had found her washing dishes at the Dusty Rose. The town had grown and changed, more civilized now, with proper storefronts and a new hotel. They walked past the saloon, and Eliza paused, looking at the building where her life had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Jacob asked. "Marrying me instead of going back east, finding a different life?" Eliza turned to him, this man who had seen her at her lowest and offered her dignity and hope. His face was more weathered now, lines etched around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. Not for a single moment. This is the life I was meant for, Jacob. With you, with our children. I would not change a thing." He pulled her close and kissed her, right there on the street, and Eliza laughed against his mouth. "We are too old to be carrying on like this in public." "We are not too old for anything," he said. "I love you as much today as I did the day I married you, more even." "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for hiring a dishwasher to teach your daughter reading. Best decision you ever made." "Second best," he corrected. "The best was asking you to marry me." They returned to the ranch, to their children and their life, and Eliza reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She had left Boston chasing a dream, lost everything, and found herself washing dishes for scraps in a frontier saloon. She had been hired as a teacher and ended up as a wife, a mother, an educator, and a pillar of her community. The years continued to roll past, filled with the ordinary joys and sorrows of life. They buried Tomas when he was 70, and Maria went to live with one of her own children, though she visited often. They saw Lucy's children grow and start school. They watched Thomas take over more and more of the ranch work as Jacob's back began to trouble him. Ellen went to college in California, becoming a professor of literature, though she always came home for Christmas. Samuel, their youngest, became a doctor, studying in San Francisco and returning to open a practice in Tombstone, serving the people of the territory with the same dedication his parents had shown. And through it all, Jacob and Eliza remained each other's anchor. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the desert, and counted their blessings. They had built a life together out of almost nothing, and it had been a good life, a full life, a life worth living. When Eliza was 50, she finally closed the school, turning it over to a younger teacher who had studied with Lucy. Her own children were grown, and she was ready to rest, to spend her days reading and gardening and enjoying her grandchildren. Jacob had handed over the ranch to Thomas, who ran it with the same careful attention his father had shown. They traveled a bit, visiting Ellen in California and Samuel in Tombstone, seeing Lucy and her family. But they always came home to the ranch, to the house Jacob had built with his own hands, to the land that had witnessed their love story. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. It seemed like half the territory turned up. Former students and neighbors and friends they had made over the decades. There was food and music and dancing, and Jacob and Eliza waltzed under the stars, just as they had on their wedding night. "Did you ever imagine this?" Eliza asked as they swayed together. "When you hired that desperate girl washing dishes?" "I imagined hoping," Jacob said. "I imagined that maybe, just maybe, I might find someone to share my life with again. But what we have exceeded anything I could have dreamed. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eliza. You and the life we built together. We saved each other," Eliza said. "That is what I tell our grandchildren when they ask how we met. Grandpa saved me from washing dishes for scraps, and I saved him from a lonely life. We saved each other, and we will save each other until the end," Jacob promised. They kept that promise. As they grew older, they supported each other through the aches and pains of aging. When Jacob's arthritis made it hard for him to work, Eliza rubbed liniment into his joints. When Eliza's eyesight began to fail, Jacob read to her every evening, just as she had once read to Lucy. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The old ranch house had been expanded and renovated over the years, but the porch remained the same, and they still sat there every evening, holding hands and watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lucy came to visit one spring day when Jacob was 78 and Eliza was 72. She found them on the porch as always, and she sat with them for a while, just enjoying the peace. "You know," Lucy said, "I tell my grandchildren about the day Papa brought you home. I was so scared at first, this strange woman coming to live with us. But then you read to me, and I knew everything was going to be all right. You gave me my love of learning, Mama. You gave me everything. You gave me a family," Eliza said. "You were my first child, even before Thomas and Ellen and Samuel. I loved you from the moment I met you." "I know," Lucy said softly. "I always knew." When Jacob was 80, his heart began to fail. The doctor said it could be days or months. There was no way to know. Jacob took the news calmly and asked only that he be allowed to die at home, in the bed he had shared with Eliza for over half a century. Eliza refused to leave his side. She sat with him day and night, holding his hand, telling him stories of their life together. Their children came, and their grandchildren, and the house was full of love and grief. On a clear October morning, with the desert air crisp and clean, Jacob squeezed Eliza's hand and opened his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for loving me, for building this life with me. I will wait for you on the other side." "I will not be long," Eliza promised, tears streaming down her face. "Wait for me, my love." He smiled, that same gentle smile that had captured her heart 40 years earlier, and then he was gone. Eliza mourned him deeply, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than she looked, stronger than anyone expected. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her family, still sharp-minded and loving. She saw Samuel's children grow, and Ellen's, and Lucy's grandchildren have children of their own. The family she and Jacob had started continued to grow and spread across the territory and beyond. On her last day, a warm spring afternoon when she was 77, Eliza asked to be taken to the porch. Her children gathered around her, and she looked out at the land she had loved, the desert that had become her home. "I had a good life," she said, "better than I ever imagined. Your father and I built something here, something that will last. Remember that. Remember that love is the most important thing, and family, and treating people with dignity. That is what matters." "We will remember, Mama," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "We love you," Ellen added. "I love you all," Eliza said. "So much. Tell your children about us. Tell them about the cowboy who hired a dishwasher to teach his daughter to read, and how that simple act of kindness changed everything." As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in the colors she had loved for over 40 years, Eliza Monroe Hartley closed her eyes and went to join her husband. They buried her beside Jacob on a hill overlooking the ranch, and their headstone read simply, "Together forever." Their descendants gathered every year on the anniversary of their wedding, keeping alive the story of how a desperate young woman and a lonely widower found each other in the Arizona territory and built a love that lasted a lifetime. The school Eliza had founded continued for decades, educating generations of children. The ranch Thomas inherited stayed in the family for over 100 years. But more than buildings or land, Jacob and Eliza's true legacy was the love they had shared and passed down to their children. It was a love born of mutual respect and kindness, of seeing each other's worth when the world did not. It was a love that had started with a simple question in a saloon and grown into something that touched hundreds of lives. They had found each other when both were at their lowest, and together they had built something extraordinary. And that, their descendants always said, was the best kind of love story. Not perfect people finding each other, but broken people healing each other and building a beautiful life from the pieces. The Dusty Rose Saloon was torn down in the 1920s, replaced by a bank. But the locals still told stories about the girl who washed dishes there and caught the eye of a cowboy looking for a teacher. Some said she was an angel sent to save the Hartley family. Others said she was just a woman in the right place at the right time. But those who knew the full story understood the truth. Eliza and Jacob had saved each other, and in doing so, they had created a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. Their story was written not in books or newspapers, but in the lives of everyone they had touched, in the children they had taught, and the family they had raised, and the community they had served. It was a simple story, really, as simple as a man offering a job to a woman in need. But from that simple beginning had grown something magnificent, something worth remembering, something that proved that love and kindness could transform the world, one life at a time.